Welcome everybody to How to Do More with Less with my special guest, Hilario Fiandeiro of Contact Center Smart. Now, Hilario, you've been in this industry since starting out as a call center agent with Discovery Health back in, when would that be? About 95. That makes it about 30 years ago. So were those your early days in call centers? Did you specifically want to get into call centers, or how did you end up there?
I think, like the majority of people, you sort of just landed in the call center. You know, I didn't set out to be in the contact center. I knew that the company itself it was actually called Momentum Health back in the day, before it changed to Discovery. And I knew it was a pretty good, innovative company. They had a great product. So essentially, I wanted to get in there, and like I think, like the majority of people, have it as a stepping stone onto something else. And so that's where we landed. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. And then you went on and you picked up a lot of credentials along the way. For those who haven't read the bio, Hilario has picked up a BCom, an MBA. He's one of the few South Africans with certified CICM, certified call center management consultant, fellow of the Chartered Institute of Customer Management, and also an accredited member of the CCX Consult Network. So Hilario, probably one of the most highly qualified, in fact, in academic terms, in contact centers, and 30 years in practical experience. And you've been consulting since around, I think we met in around 2006, 2007 and started working together. But let's bring the focus back to your new book, How to Do More with Less in the Contact Center Space. And I found that absolutely fascinating. And for those who haven't got a copy of Hilario's book yet, it's 160 something pages of the most incredibly valuable content I think anybody can get their hands on in the contact center space. It's practical, it's to the point, and very easy reading. But Laurie, I remember you doing that presentation. We were both at a conference in Dubai, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. You used the theme of how to do more with less. It's now evolved into this book. So why did you write the book? And the second part of that is, why did you give it away?
So I mean, I initially had a talk and a presentation that we did, like you mentioned, not only in South Africa, sort of in Dubai and around the world. And really the focus is around how to do more with less. I mean, it's the very basic concept that's being, and everybody tries, and we try to do this on a daily basis. And I just found a lot of the content that was out there was true, so people would say, okay, if we want to deliver a better customer experience, we've got to make sure our culture is aligned, or we've got to ensure that our systems are kind of integrated and speaking to one another. And those are all very true. But I felt that some of the stuff didn't go into sort of a more detailed level. And I know for maybe people that aren't in this environment, this is quite a lot of detail to sort of unpack. But I felt it would be very useful to put something together that was practical and that people could follow along in their own contact centers and make it their own. So, and so I wanted to put this book together that enhanced the slides. I mean, slides were just like, flashy, but the whole process of trying to put and expand the concepts and ideas led to this idea of putting a book together. And obviously, sort of giving it away was a conscious decision. It was more around being able to share that content so that people can get up and running. I just felt that the practical value of having this in read and used hopefully by a lot of people would be quite valuable. And obviously, as a consultant, I wanted to return in some way or shape back to to maybe a consulting engagement somewhere down the line. But I think in this business that we're in, in order to show our value and in order to kind of let people know the kind of value that we add. It's we need to give some of the content away, and that's the way things work.
I was delighted just when I first saw the publication that you put it together, because one of the things that I'd really like everybody on the call today to appreciate, and I'm sure you're going to show us in content in the book, but Laurie and I worked together on a very, very large, almost 1,000-seat call center back, it must have been 10 years ago, where the bottom line is the organization executives and senior management had no idea of the cost per call or cost per call minute or cost per interaction minute. And what that must have taken 2 or 3 months to unpack, to get to a point where you could actually say in this queue, it was running at, called it R2.20 per minute, and the driving factors behind it. Now, that became almost the benchmark for contact center costing. In fact, I used elements of it in my seminars, your ABC costing methodology. So why don't you just touch on that, the importance of knowing and understanding those costs, and then we'll unpack the book.
Yes, I mean, I think, and I'll go through it in a little bit more detail, but I think one of the starting points of any improvement exercise, we got to know where we're at. What is our starting point, and like you said, this sort of exercise can get very complicated, and so what I've done for this book, I've simplified it so just that we have the absolute essential nuts and bolts to be able to start this optimization journey, not from a point of not just starting from anywhere, but starting from a point where we know, okay, this is where we're at, and this is where we'd like to get to. So yes, so fundamentally that's, and one of the key concepts is we got to know where we're at. We got to know where our costs, and if it's a revenue, if it's a sales cost, we got to know our revenue per interaction. And so that becomes central to the way we move forward on our optimization journey.
Also, like your views on something I'm finding in my day-to-day engagement with various clients and doing consulting is more and more today, it's about ROI. Show me the money. Show me your return on investment, whether it's a new technology or process change or change in recruitment or training. Whatever their investment is, the boardroom wants to say, show me the money, ROI. And no doubt there's a lot of that, and I've read that in your book, is you lean quite heavily on that aspect.
100%. Yeah, I think, contact center operations managers, they are by necessity focused on service level, abandons and AHT, and all of those things are of prime importance. What this book adds is kind of an ROI or a financial layer on top of that to say, okay, what does it mean to save like 3 seconds on a call? If I'm saving 20 calls, or if I'm saving, say, 20% of my incoming calls because of some kind of inefficiency in the system, how much does that mean to me, and what can I invest in to get that sort of return? So all of those kind of things need to be pretty clear, because then I think you find it a little bit easier to get the budget you need to make your contact center greater. I think a lot of the people that I certainly deal with struggle to show value, and hopefully that this kind of sets some of the foundation to do that.
Hilario, I know you've got a couple of slides you want to share with us. Why don't you take us into the inner workings of your book and some of the highlights?
Yeah, sure.
Talk about the 6 tactics. So the floor is.
Thanks, Rod. And yeah, I'll share my presentation now, but just to say thank you very much to all the people who've made the time to attend. And so what I'm going to do is go through I've put a presentation together where we talk about principles and tactics, and just to give an overview of the book. But I think at any time during the presentation, you're welcome to just stop. If there's a question that comes up, we can try and deal with it in a way that sort of makes it flow, but so that we can get as much value as possible. So.
Okay. Excellent. So I'll be monitoring the chat lines, and please, you can use the under that little button at the bottom there, reactions, or you can put your hand up, and I will bring you in to have a little chat with Hilario as well. So, Hilario, the floor is yours.
Great stuff. Thank you very much once again. So it's really a guide on how to cut costs, but without cutting quality. So that's kind of the proviso. So. In terms of what I want to share today is essentially 4 principles, 6 tactics, and 2 to-dos. And it's quite a bit of stuff to get through, but we will go through the highlights in a fair amount of detail. So first up, we know in the contact center that we love best practices. Best practice is good, and it's good for a reason, because we want to be able to do what the best contact centers do. So best practice is good. So if we're talking about a contact center, we want to make sure that it's lean. It applies 6 Sigma principles. We've got a robust quality assurance process. We do calibrations on our calls, and all of those best practices are very good, and they're good for a reason. But best practice comes with a bit of a proviso here. So there's kind of a dark side to this, and I say it's beware of the curse of, and I call it TWADI, and what it really stands for. That's the way we've always done it. So best practice is good because it gives you kind of a checklist of what to do, but the word best means you've arrived. You can't go any better, and I'm a little bit nervous about that, and so and I find a lot of contact centers refer, this is the way we've always done it, and the thinking is around, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but the idea is somewhere along the line things might break. And so what my first principle in that kind of runs throughout the book is that better practice is better. So the idea is that we got to take best practice, but we got to try and kind of relearn, rethink, and reevaluate those practices more often than we do. And I think sometimes people are too entrenched. Once we get into a best practice idea, it becomes very crystallized, and it's difficult to change. And so this is one of the principles that I do share. The next thing that I want to talk about is a lot of the. And funny enough, some of the criticism that I get from, especially maybe on a book like this, is to say, don't sweat the small stuff. People are saying, Hilario, look, you're focusing on small things. Shaving a few seconds here is not really going to make an impact. And I get where that's coming from. We don't want to focus on getting good at something that is wrong. We don't want to be really efficient at the wrong process. So I get that. But there's this idea that if you improve everything about your operation by just 1%, you'll achieve significant gains when you put all of these things together. And we'll know this is called kind of the marginal gains philosophy. It was really made famous by the British Olympic cycling team, and even their Tour de France team. British riders were known for quite a while and as being pretty mediocre and average. But the person then, I think this guy's name is Dale Brailsford, came together and said, what if we improve 1% about everything that we do. So, for example, we make the seats more comfortable. We put alcohol on the tires so that the grip is a bit better. And so combining all of those things together, we know the successes that the British team did, get once they put these things together. And I think a similar thing happens in contact centers. If we can sharpen up the various aspects, and that's what I'll go into when I talk about the tactics. But really, what underlines this is this concept of the marginal gains philosophy, and embracing that. And then linked, my third principle is linked to that is this idea of gains for good. So that once we fix something, it stays fixed forever. And so that's a remarkable return. I mean, if we're able to fix an inefficiency, that inefficiency keeps on returning year after year after year. So it kind of expands that ROI. And so
it's the gift that keeps on giving, I would presume.
That's kind of like the principle, and it and one of the things that we all know that Jeff Bezos, the former Amazon CEO, one of the things that he said that really stuck with me, says focus on improving things that don't change, because, like, for example, a customer will always want to have their call answered faster. Well, when they're on the call, they want that call to be as efficient and as effective as possible. And so those things never change. And if we can kind of just zone in and focus and make micro changes to the way we engage with customers, between the marginal gains and the gains for good, we have got, the ROI starts building on itself.
Yeah.
So then another kind of like pothole or a potential sort of blockage in or where people say, but Hilario, you're just talking about taking shortcuts and maybe cutting corners. I want to make a distinction between the two. So taking shortcuts, and when I say shortcuts, it's the kind of shortcuts that you're able to do more with less. So that's the kind of things that I'll be discussing. It's very different to cutting corners. Cutting corners is doing less with less. It's, for example, I don't know, if you've bought a packet of crisps recently, that packet seems to be getting a little bit smaller. And then when you actually open it, the packet seems to be filled with more air than actual crisps. And it's kind of very slight. And so that is cutting corners. That's kind of doing less. And okay, you might be paying the same, but you're getting less. So in the contact center space, the kind of improvements that I'm talking is not to say, okay, let's pay the agents slightly less. We get a slightly lower quality agents. It might return in the short term, but in the long run, what's going to happen? So my view is really on the long run. And then principle number 4 is really around what I find in contact centers is that there's a lot of what I call contact center kings. There's methodologies that we focus on. There's AI and technology is king. There's people saying, no, actually process is king. And so depending on which angle a person comes from, their specific niche is king. But what this book, what I try and do through this book is to kind of explode this principle, which is, but what trumps the king? What is above the king? Now, what is above the king is results. So results are the ace that trumps the king. So are we actually delivering a better customer experience? And so on that point, I thought it'd be quite interesting to run a poll, which I did a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn, and I asked the question. So I wanted my network to put their customer hat on. So as a customer, I asked, would you say your typical contact center experience is better worse or the same now or recently as compared to say 5 to 10 years ago. So whenever I design like a poll, I've sort of got a hypothesis in my mind as to what the result would be. So for this particular one, in my head, I thought, like from a personal point of view, when you find a contact center, I haven't seen any amazing improvement or any, to me, it's about the same as before. That's sort of I thought that would be sort of my gut call. But it was interesting because the data looked like this. So once all the votes were tallied, so 53 more than half of the network or the people that answered this quiz or this poll were saying that actually my experiences now are worse now than before. So I preempted the question. I said, like, with all the developments in AI, in process reengineering, in outsourcing, in getting the experts to look after our calls, what is the actual impact on you as a customer? And more than half of them said it's actually worse now than before. And I know we've got a tendency to inflate the negative over the positive. So there's a little bit of that happening in the data. Some of them were positive, saying some of them saying it's actually better now than before. And that came in at just under a quarter. And the final one said 22% said it was about the same. So my point here is that all of our methods, all of our technologies, all of the things that we're doing needs to deliver better results. And so like we mentioned in our initial discussion, I set the scene in the book, and I put together a little costing as simply as I could. So when we're talking about results, we got to understand, okay, what is our starting point? What are the things that what for us in our contact center? What does it look like? So I'm just showing you a screenshot of and the people who have downloaded the book can access this as a spreadsheet and then make these numbers, these input numbers their own. So I've just taken a stab and rounded off the numbers and said, look, in our little contact center, our cost per seat is 25,000 per, and I'm talking in rands. It's for the people that are from a different country, we can convert to a different currency. But so we're saying fundamentally we got to understand some of our cost structure pretty well. And without going into too much detail in this session, we need to understand, what are our agents costing us? Not only just I'll start with the easy one first. Not just their basic salary, but what are the benefits? What are all the other stuff that the training costs, that all of that stuff that gets together. And then in order to make the agents great, they need to be supported by good management, leaders, and support staff, quality assurance, workforce management, and all of that. How much is that costing us? Of course, we need technology and telephony and that. So all of these items have got a cost attached to it. So the idea is really to try and understand, okay, what is our cost structure looking like? And then understanding, okay, based on our contact center. So when I've tried to make this as practical as possible. So in our little contact center, and again, each person who downloads the or gets access to the spreadsheet, then changes it according to what happens in their contact center. But I think as a starting point, we need to understand. If I'm taking on average, say for example, 30 calls answered in a month, and there's a certain average handle time, I need to know, okay, my cost per call answered is X, which in this case is say 16 or 17 Rand. Call per call answered minute is just over 4 Rand, and per second it's 7. Once we got those basics in place, we can start playing the game. I think that's kind of your your entry ticket to saying, okay, now let's have a look at some of the tactics that we can use to make sure that that we're on board. So I don't know, maybe just a pause there. Any
there are no questions coming in through the chat at the moment, Hilario.
Okay, that's fine.
But I think, just to revert back to, I've done a quick conversion. It's about $1,300 per seat, which I think is a pretty fair figure. And again, looking at both operating as captives and also in the BPO space, it's pretty much you're right on the money there. But one of the things, and I'll just interject, when I run my seminars, I very often have 10, 20, sometimes more hardcore contact center managers in that sessions. And I ask that basic question, the cost per minute to run a call or an interactions call center. And sadly, not one in 10 actually have even the vaguest idea of what that figure is. So I'm delighted that through your book and then the downloadable models, costing models, that hopefully we'll get more and more people out there in our industry really getting to grips with the fundamental, which is what does it actually cost? Back to you, Hilario.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, and I mean those actual cost numbers are kind of, it's not completely a thumbs up. I mean, it is based on some sort of reality, but those things are changing all the time, and that will vary obviously from contact center to contact center, and this is why I thought it would be useful to include a model as part of the setup, so that you can go through your journey in the way that you need to go through that. So once we've got a base of setting the scene, I look at a couple of tactics, and these are very operational sort of tactics. And the first one looks at AHT, so average handle time. That is central to a lot of all contact center operations, whether it's voice, whether it's chat, all of those have got some kind of an handle time that we can average, and we can see what's the longest, what's the shortest, per query type, per agent, and we can do a lot of things with that. And there's a lot of talk around ditching AHT and not measuring it, and I get where that comes from. For example, maybe at an individual agent level, I would avoid maybe measuring individual AHT and maybe attaching an incentive to that, because it starts kind of constraining the AHT maybe the way that it in the way that it shouldn't go. So, but what is important is that we need to minimize wasteful AHT and optimize fruitful. So so the idea with AHT is like there's various components to this, and I go through kind of defining what it is. So in this depiction over here, each of these blocks, the welcome message, the waiting in queue, all of these things can be optimized. Like for example, if the waiting in queue component is, if you've not forecasted properly and you've got too few agents, that waiting in queue component is going to really expand, and customers are going to get frustrated and then abandon and not even get to talk to an agent. On the flip side, if you've got too many agents and they're waiting for a call to happen, that waiting in queue kind of applies to them, and that's also not optimal. So the waiting in queue is already your first indicator to say, like, let's try and optimize that particular number. But once we go into the actual conversation, we can then divide it into, and so the optimization starts with something really small, which is this ring time sliver of time that in some contact centers, the agents still have to physically, the call comes through, it rings a couple of times, and they physically have to sort of answer it. And one of my upfront recommendations in any contact center that I normally go to is to say, let's try and make that automatic. Let's auto answer that for the agent, so that that the call comes through automatically, and you're shaving that 2 or 3 seconds on each call for nothing. So So that to me is like a prime example of what I call a kind of a viable shortcut, because generally you're shaving off time, but you're not risking any kind of quality going down. So we then move on to, for example, talk with the customer, putting on hold and after call work time. And we tend to measure this as just a KPI. So we get an average that we see if it's trending up or down, or but what I'm suggesting in the book is to say we need to really get into this number a little bit more. And in some ways, I'm suggesting that AHT is like cholesterol. in the old days, we used to have one cholesterol number, and it was either good or bad. But now, once we start getting into the details a bit, we understand that there's actually good cholesterol and there's bad cholesterol. So HDL good, LDL bad, and similar scenario for contact centers. So there's fruitful HT, so there's good HT and there's bad. There's wasteful HT. So wasteful HT is, for example, a consultant asking the wrong questions. And so the conversation goes in circles, or offering the wrong solutions, or the systems that they're working on, they need to toggle between 4 or 5 systems that are hanging. That's going to add, that's waste, that's wasteful HT. Or maybe the consultant is speaking too fast, and the customer says, sorry, can you repeat that? Any kind of repetition on a call is wasteful. So what I try and suggest in the book is to not only measure the number as a number, get into the detail and understand, okay, what part of my conversations is fruitful and what part of it is wasteful. And I suggest, okay, let's look at ways in which we can minimize the waste, but don't just stop there. Try and replace that with fruitful HT. So when I talk about fruitful HT, I'm thinking about things like, if I look at this customer and I can see an issue that the customer hasn't asked me about it directly, if I'm an agent and I'm measuring an average talk time, I'm going to just cut the call there and leave it. But if I'm kind of measured on just delivering the most value to that customer, I'm going to say, okay, I noticed X, Y, and Z about your status or your account. And I think you should be aware of X, Y, and Z. So you kind of forward resolve issues that might happen down the line. That's fruitful HT. Or you might be wanting to launch a new product or a new process, and you can ask the customer, just wanting to get your opinion on, does this product, if we enhance it in a particular way, would that be valuable to you? And you start kind of doing a bit of research. So there's various elements in which we can, make HT more fruitful and reduce wasteful. So to me, I think that is absolutely a key thing that we need to look in terms of doing more with less.
And Laura, I can jump in here just for a second. Yeah. I think you raised such an important point, and I wouldn't be doing justice to our sponsors and my client Corby Speech Analytics if I didn't raise it at this point in time. That, fortunately nowadays with kind of low-cost speech analytics, we're actually able to get in there and dissect 100% of calls in all the vernacular languages. And, the quick wins are right there to see whether it is silent time in the call, or, as you quite rightly say, is all of that wasteful AHT. To take 10% off a call AHT puts a huge amount into the bottom line. Also, on this pause here, we've got a question coming in from Brian Schneider. Brian, would you like to come in and answer and ask that question live to Hilario? You live, go for it. Brian, you're muted. You're not there.
There we go.
Okay,
Good
Brian.
morning, everybody. Hi, Hilario. Great
morning, Brian.
webinar. And Rod, thanks for bringing us in there. I just love what you said about where we're cutting corners, and just for about 14 years now, our partner and I have been focusing on just that. And one of the ways that we, just to add to what you said, cutting corners is not a bad thing, because often our agents are really proficient and they have a lot of experience because they're doing it 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, whatever. They've got a lot of experience in terms of what adds value. If you then go and link it to an outcome, then, because often we say we don't want to cut corners because there may be some risk in terms of that. But if we start linking it, which we can do, to first of all compliance, if that's an issue, and then to customer impact. And that's how we do it. We have a look at those two measures and say, okay, so now the outcome is still within the parameters, so there's no risk. We haven't impacted the risk, and we've got a result to the customer, and the customer is really happy about that. Maybe shortened the end-to-end process time, whatever. So I love that. Great point.
Great stuff. Thanks for that, Brian, and great contribution there. Back to you, Hilario.
Thanks. Now this one is obviously been in the media all over. So it's around automating robotic customer conversations, and essentially my starting point is that each when I looked at the cost model, there's already a component of interactions that are handled through self-service, through chatbots, through any automated solution that helps customers kind of get to their resolution by self-serving essentially, and by interacting maybe not with an actual agent, but with an automated solution. But at any given time, right now, like some of our actual conversations with agents, there are components within that conversation that there are kind of human indicators. So there's a lot of negotiation that's happening on calls, or maybe on a sales calls. There's persuading and then influencing. There's innovating solutions or coming up with resolutions to issues. There's obviously teaching and coaching customers that requires human touch, and there's dealing with emotions. There's pacifying irate customers. There's all of those sort of human issues that's happening in conversations. But right now there's agents that also indicate doing a lot of routine stuff. So it's routine, predictable, scripted, rule-based manual. So, the answer, the customer asks a question, there's only one right answer, and the agent provides it, and the call is done. So, from an optimization point of view, we need to see those automated or those type of conversations automated. And we know that this whole idea of AI and the fact that AI is actually maybe encroaching on some of those human indicators. AI can start teaching and coaching and summarizing based on all the information that it has ingested about a company's product or processes, and being able to then assist the agent in actually providing better quality answers to a customer's query. So we know that AI is encroaching and then actually probably creating having a bigger influence and starting to impact the human indicator components. But in terms of optimization, one of the key drivers, or one of the things that I mentioned specifically in the book is understanding what part of our conversations are automated, and how can we design our self-service solutions to absorb some of that stuff, so that what is left over are the type of queries that agents are more qualified and should be dealing with. So that's, and I won't go into too much detail there, but there's certainly there's a way of there's a process for trying to get automation into the process. Another one that I look at specifically is understanding repeat contacts. So repeat contacts. So if I had to ask you, which scene below is the biggest destroyer of customer loyalty? Is it being treated like a number? Is it needing more than one contact to resolve an issue? Is it repeating the same information over and over? Is it being transferred from pillar to post? Now, all of these things are horror cases. But the great research that was done by it's actually a bit old now, but it's still pretty good research. The effortless experience, they become part of the Gartner group. They did a whole lot of research to say in an interaction, what is adding towards loyalty and what is taking away from loyalty. So a couple of things, if we can teach a customer something new, it kind of adds. It's a customer at the end of that call will say, I'm more likely to stick with this organization because they took the time to teach me something new that I didn't know. But on the negative side, if a customer has to make more than one contact to resolve the same issue, it starts destroying the customer loyalty. A couple of the other negative things are, if a customer is just receiving kind of generic service from an agent that's sort of like listless and lethargic to answer particular queries, that's not great. Repeating information over and over, being transferred all over the place. So to answer that question, more than one contact to resolve an issue does not only cost more, it also has a outsized impact on customer loyalty. So this is why the repeat contacts is something that requires a special kind of look at why, what are the root causes of customer contact. So a lot of contact centers often ask us, so what part of, what's your percentage of repeats? And even that is difficult to answer for some, but certainly we need to not only understand the number, but also understand why are customers needing to call more than once. Obviously, a first thing, a big issue is not having issues resolved in the first contact in the first place. Not being accessible. So when you're trying to phone, waiting for too long, or like I try to email and get a response, and I've got to then call again, via the phone channel. Lack of knowledge, lack of promptness. So all of these issues that customers expect on a call are probably the same drivers that are driving the repeat calls. So if we want to kind of kill two birds with one stone, so diminish repeat calls and meet customer expectations, it kind of speaks to this understanding the same thing. So and not doing things right in the first time. So those kind of issues I pick up in the book and say that repeat contacts is something that we need to look at. On the fourth one, we got to preempt first time contacts. So all of the discussion that we've had so far is we are reacting to something. So we've now we've reacted to a call coming in or an email. We're trying to minimize the HT. We've tried to minimize repeat contacts. So all of those things are reactive. And in a way, I think a lot of contact center people we like reacting to, like if we're able to react to a situation on time and go the extra mile and make the customer happy, we feel good. But really, I think we almost got to take a step back to say, look, the best service is still no service. We need to try and react less and maybe proact more, and getting customers, avoiding them from even contacting us in the first place. So, this is where we got to anticipate predictable events. So say, for example, I don't know, it's tax season. We know that customers want their tax certificate. So back in the day, we used to phone them. I know now we get a message and it's automatically sent out. But that's just a very obvious example. And in fact, we can use, and one of the key strengths of an AI solution is to be able to predict what the customer's next move is. And so I think the preempting notion of optimizing contact centers is going to become quite a big deal. And so anticipating predictable events, we could be finding, customers are calling in to say, look, I got this letter, but I didn't understand X, Y, and Z about it. I didn't know what to do with it. So maybe there was no clear call to action, or there was confusing communication. And so all of these things are generally preventable. So one of the key kind of recommendations is to have a look at any call that comes through and say, okay, how could we have prevented this call from even coming in the first place? So it's kind of a proactive and a preemptive look at that. So the things that we've been discussing so far all aim to shrink demand. So lower HT, lower repeat calls, lower preventable calls. That's kind of making our shrink or getting our incoming demand into the contact center less. Another aspect of optimization is to how can we stretch supply? How do we make our contact center do more with the supply that it's got? And this is the fifth tactic, is to look at how have we structured our contact center optimally. And when we look at structure, we generally there's kind of two, or the call center will sort of range from what I call specialized, where we've got smaller call center units with specialized agents dealing with a specific type of call. And we might even specialize that to a specific type of channel. So only doing emails or chats or and so on and so forth. And then on the generalized side, we're saying, okay, we've got this group of agents. They can deal with any of the calls that are coming through on any channel. So that's kind of the two extremes. And I'll just give an example over here. So at any point in time, a contact center is in one of these sort of states or in between. The optimization element of this, or the idea behind this, is to say, if we move to a kind of generalized or a pooled scenario, we are going to be more efficient. So economies of scale are going to kick in. We're going to be able to answer more calls with less agents, or answer, have a better service level with the same number of agents. So essentially, we're going to be able to deal with those incoming calls more efficiently than if we had a specialized call center. So there's various pros and cons. And so, for example, with the two. So, for example, with agent occupancy, so how busy agents are in a generalized contact center, that tends to be higher. And in a specialized contact center, their occupancy is generally lower. So from a optimization point of view, we want to go in the generalized direction. In terms of like understanding planning or complexity and making sure we're having the right amount of people at the right, for the right queue. If we have a generalized queue, it's a lot less complicated to plan. And so we have a positive there on the generalized. In terms of customer effort, if a customer just phones in and doesn't have to make a routing selection, and it just goes through to a kind of a central queue, much less effort. And whereas, for example, on a specialized one, they got to then understand, okay, I've got to be routed to this particular call center, and that the effort's a little bit more. Some of these things are debatable. So, like, for example, in general, in average handle time, generally, if we find on a specialized queue with a specialized agent, they should be able to do their work a lot quicker, because that's the only thing that they do. So the average handle time component should be less, all things being equal. Also, it's much shorter to get an agent to being proficient if they're just dealing with a smaller amount of work that they need to get through. This is the one that is particularly debatable. So generally, we should find a higher quality in a specialized contact center, but obviously cost effectiveness is generalized on the generalized side. So my concluding thing on this is that I find a lot of contact centers are unnecessarily specialized. So they've broken it into units because and it could be from what we mentioned earlier. That's the way they've always done things, and I find that that all things being equal, if we can try and move to a more sort of generalized contact center where the risks are manageable. That would be a thing to think about in terms of doing more with less, because you're able to make use of the economies of scale. And then this optimizing people productivity. This is probably one of the things that we do best at. So we are quite focused on measuring productivity. Making sure our agents are as productive as possible. So, some of the things that get in the way of productivity, could be a whole bunch of these interrelated things like leadership, culture. Maybe we've got the wrong people. So, I always remember when I started off at Discovery. The CEO Adrian Gore used to make a particular point about saying we don't want to be thick-skinned in the contact center. So we want our agents to be able to. Sorry, I'm probably swearing on the podcast, not kosher, but we want our people to give a shit. We need our people to really kind of like care and be more thin-skinned. So I think primarily one of the key aspects of making sure is that of productivity is making sure we get trying to get the right people in and trying to keep them kind of caring, because after getting call after call of ranting, we do sort of build up a bit of resistance and a lack of lack of urgency and a lack of care that might come through in our sort of conversations. But essentially, look, when we're looking at agent productivity, I'm looking just at numbers over here. If we dissect agent productivity in a particular month, we've got shrinkage factors, and then we've got available to work hours. So one of the key things that we need to be mindful is how much out of 100. If I pay my agent 168 hours in a month, what percentage or what number of hours actually lands up productively speaking to customers, and this is the whole idea of like zoning in and understanding what are your actual productive hours, and of course here we've got restrictions, because for example, if we've scheduled too many agents, their available but idle time will be quite big. But if that's kind of seen as kind of wasteful. But if we schedule too few, their available time shrinks to almost nothing. But then we've got agents that are overly occupied, and then there's issues of burnout. So when we're talking about agent productivity, there's kind of we're always talking about optimizing. So it's about getting the right amount of hours. So for example, if we look at the shrinkage factors, we can't do things about, like, say, planned leave, but unplanned leave we can try and minimize that. So lunch and breaks are generally quite standard. Coaching and training is actually one of the things that does get minimized but shouldn't get minimized. And then there's always going to be other or unexplained reasons why people are not where they're supposed to be, and that needs to be minimized. So when we're talking about agent productivity, there's the hours perspective, and then there's obviously the quality of those hours. So that are key. So so that's kind of just a quick rundown in terms of the 6 tactics. So again, none of the stuff is earth-shattering. It's not new, but it's the idea of having that rigor and of combining all of those elements, so that we start producing a contact center that's kind of more measured in a meaningful way. So this is why I point to the I want to end off with the 2 to-dos, and the one is part of the book. There's an optimization audit, and the audit really runs through the kind of best practices that we see through, like, for example, like that I've discussed in terms of all the various tactics. So it's literally is, do I, for example, if I'm looking at HT, am I conscious of, minimizing wasteful HT? Do I monitor the amount of wasted time in an HT conversation? When it comes to repeat calls, do I understand what's the makeup of that? So it literally is just a checklist to say, okay, is this what we're doing in our contact center? So it's a 60-point checklist. So it's not too onerous, and it just gives us a kind of a way forward in terms of saying, okay, this is the kind of things that we do, and some of and it gives us it'll give you a look at what needs to be done, and then you can start prioritizing your to-do list. So it really stems from an audit that you can do by yourselves, and then there's the optimization quiz. So contact centers, we talk about weird things like schedule adherence, agent occupancy, service level, and we got to really understand those items quite well, because when we wanting to optimize, we need to understand what we're talking about, what we mean, and so I think it's useful for everybody in the industry to take the quiz and just to see where we're at. So that's really my thing in terms of what I wanted to share. So I just I don't know if there's any further questions that have come through.
We don't have any questions coming through on the chat line. I think we've answered all of those. We're running a little bit over time, but there's a point where we're talking about AI and bots and automation. In a country like ours, where we have massive unemployment and we're on a concerted drive for youth employment in particular, how do you see the balancing act between deployment of bots and self-service, for example, at the same time as balancing with creating those jobs that our country so desperately needs? So if you give us just a quick minute or so on that, I'd appreciate that.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, so that's a nice zoomed out question in terms of like zooming out and seeing what does optimization mean for us. So I think certainly in the short term, jobs will be impacted, disrupted, whatever adjective you want to use. But if you look at the longer term, the picture for, say, for example, South Africa, if you have to ask yourself, what makes South Africa a top BPO destination, for example? We've got lower costs. Is often cited. We've got skilled agents with a deep talent pool. We've got agents that are culturally aware and they understand, the inbound cultures, or there's a cultural alignment. Those are often the reasons that they could get put forth. And I'd like to sort of add another one, which is we want to make sure that South African contact centers are known as the most optimized. So we
Very
take
good.
we take our optimization things quite seriously, and that creates demand, which hopefully creates jobs. But it is a long-term play, and I do think that it's a win-win in the long run.
Excellent. Hilario, we could actually go on all day. I know it's a 168-page book. There's so much content in there. What I'm going to suggest is that we actually fire up another session in a month or so and maybe put out to the industry to input more questions for you. But thank you so much. I mean, it's really mind-blowing what you've actually put together in one place and made available to the industry. And I think just to recap, a copy of Hilario's book will be sent to everybody that's registered to the webinar. It'll also be promoted. I'll do an edit of this recording and I'll put that up onto my YouTube channel. So you'll all have a copy of that and access to it to be able to share with colleagues and friends, etc. And also, I'll put into the output that we'll be sending you Hilario's contact details, his website, your LinkedIn profile, and what else, Hilario? Anything you'd like to share with delegates before we wrap?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much. I know we've gone a little bit over time, and we've spoken the whole session about how important time is. But I want to say thank you very much for participating and just sharing in this experience. And if there's any particular questions that you do have that maybe we haven't raised in this particular session, and it's fired some new questions, please reach out to me, and I'll do my best to try and answer those.
Wonderful. Once again, Hilario, thanks so much for sharing your time, putting all this together, putting your presentation together, sharing your knowledge so freely. It's really, I think, indicative of our industry, and particularly the contact center and BPO space, where the rest of the world does look at us and knows that we are resilient as an industry, we are optimized, and above all, we share information and knowledge freely. Which I think is a real great upside. And thank you for sharing with us today. So to all the delegates and registrants, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you got value. And please give us any feedback and comments about the format of this. And last but not least, I have to give thanks to our sponsors, Corby Speech Analytics, who makes these webinars possible. Anybody needing more information about the power of speech analytics, how to deploy it in contact center. A lot of the stuff that Hilario is talking about on optimization, low-cost speech analytics is the tool that allows you to identify these flaws in processes, in presentations, in script utilization, in all sorts of compliance issues as well. So more information about that, pop me a line. I've got a number of ebooks on the topic as well, and always happy to set up a demo. So that's it. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you on the next Contact Center Showcase. Thanks, Hilario.
Thank you, Rod. Appreciate it. Thank you. Goodbye.